Thank you very much for this great opportunity and this great uh, privilege. I really am no one special, and I think ultimately our accomplishments are who we are and not really the things that we might have done. And I really have to, confess that not only am I no one special, I'm just a sadhaka on the journey of life, along with billions of others like you, all of you here, who are fellow travelers. And so I'm only, here to just share some of my learning, some aspects of my journey, my struggles and failures, and and uh, and hope that they might add some value to your own journey and to your own striving. I have been deeply privileged and blessed to have been a student of His Holiness the Dalai Lama for some 40 years, and that I think really is a tribute to his enormous compassion and his great patience. I usually like to sort of reassure myself and to reassure my audience of His Holiness's real evaluation of me. And I remember that some 30, 25, 30 years ago, I'd done my first significant book called The Mind of the Guru, which His Holiness was kind enough to release at a function at the India Habitat Center. And here I was sort of feeling on top of Mount Everest, quite literally, that my teacher was releasing my book, and it was a hall full of friends and television cameras and what have you. And soon after, the release, the formal release was over, and His Holiness began to speak. And he said, "Well, Rajiv, he's a student of mine, and he works very hard, and he tries very hard. But how much he knows, I don't really know." And I think that description has stayed and was reconfirmed recently. We were inaugurating a Dalai Lama chair for Nalanda Studies at Goa University, and I was on stage with His Holiness. And so again, he spoke generously of our long association and said, "But he's liking to sleep a lot. I wish he'd work a little harder." So I just wanted to let you know that the person before you, who's purporting to share his insights and wisdom, that this is firmly where my guru places me. Just a few words really about the Dalai Lama himself and what we learn, as I said, from um, who he is, as we should, about who people are rather than merely what they do. And he's 85 years old. He's currently he was in retreat and then went into isolation when COVID struck. And till very recently, here was the preeminent Buddhist monk who continued to receive instruction from lamas younger than himself, in terms of the oral transmission that gets handed down from generations and from lama to lama of the different strands of practice. And he was, practicing 6, 7, 8 hours a day. And this was a man who we regard as the embodiment of the Buddha, of the Buddhist aspect of the Buddha aspect of compassion. And that really is to sort of share, the very notion, the very idea that we are all, travelers, even when we are considered by others as sort of evolved human beings, and whatever our aspirations and struggles to living fulfilled lives, it involves sadhana, practice, and effort. And I think for someone in my position, most of all. So all of us are united in many ways in all ways, really, but the fact that we share the planet we live on and the communities we live in. All of us crave a happy life and to be at peace with ourselves and with others. We seek this fulfillment in diverse ways, depending on, as I will try and share with you, our mental dispositions, but mostly from outside elements or the externalities, struggling with various levels of dissatisfaction over who we are and our situation. And when we think of the Dalai Lama, what do we see? We see a man, though he is a preeminent Buddhist monk, and touching the lives of millions of people across the world, people of diverse faiths, or even no faith at all, from different economic status and religions, nationalities, and what have you. He's a man in a simple maroon yellow robes, and he describes himself as a simple Buddhist monk. A human being whose smiling face and infectious laughter impacts us in a myriad ways. But he is intensely human, and he holds out to us a sense of the aspiration, the highest aspiration that we can achieve. But most of all, and this is the sort of the first value that he embodies that I would really like to flag, and has enormous significance in today's deeply divided and fragmented world. He is a man who celebrates diversity, plurality, reaching out to all sentient beings that they might lead fulfilling lives at peace with each other and with Mother Earth. He embraces and is open to learning from all traditions, streams of knowledge, and faiths. One of my most sort of, amongst my many very memorable moments with His Holiness the Dalai Lama has been, some years ago we organized, when the 50th anniversary of the Tibetans in exile, we organized a program of visits by a group of religious leaders led by His Holiness to the places of pilgrimage and worship of different traditions. And so here was the Dalai Lama going into the Jama Masjid in Delhi, putting on a skull cap and doing the namaz. Not just syncretically talking about another faith, but engaging in its rituals so that he could get a glimpse, an experiential glimpse of that particular faith and what he could learn from it. And then he went to a church and sang Christian hymns. And the bishop put a necklace around him with a cross. And with that cross and the necklace, he goes into a Sikh Gurdwara and ties a turban on his head, takes up a turban and goes to a temple and does the arti. So I think that, when we talk about values and fulfilling ourselves, here is somebody who is demonstrating so vividly and publicly his willingness, his motivation, his determination to love and to learn from diverse sources. And one of the major commitments of his life at age 85 is to promote these, not as an aspect of a particular faith or belief or system of knowledge, but something that could be practiced or form the basis of spiritual practice as a system that draws on the shared wisdom of all human experience and learning. So this is the man who, I will try and share a few thoughts of some of his, core ideas that make him one of the preeminent spiritual leaders and guides of our times. At the everyday level, in a sense, and as commonplace wisdom, he continues to remind us that we are far too invested in sensorial fulfillment or material fulfillment that the physical and the material world offers us. And inevitably, that leads to dissatisfaction and unfulfilled lives. We spend so much time nurturing the body, our physical appearance, our physical possessions, and even educating our minds, but with the goal, the aspiration that somehow that will get us more lucrative careers and jobs and professions, so that we can earn more money. The essence of a healthy, happy life for His Holiness the Dalai Lama is for us to understand and respond to and accept the true nature of reality and the universal values and conditions that underline the human situation. His Holiness would sort of tell us that we suffer because we do not truly understand and accept these. He often talks about the Nalanda tradition and describes himself as one of the heirs of the Nalanda tradition and India's civilizational heritage. As I cannot repeat myself often enough, not in any exclusive sense, but to celebrate his heritage, the legacy that he carries forward. And the genius of that heritage and legacy was that it provided both the wisdom, which means the intellectual knowledge, insights, and concepts, but equally the method. The methods that we could use to internalize wisdom so that it impacted our deepest reflexive responses. And this is so important because we can so often be deeply impressed by a speaker or a book that we have read and know that, it is not healthy for us to be angry or to be jealous or to be materially acquisitive, but yet we're not able to manage that reflexive response when the moment arises. So the great contribution of this heritage is that it dovetails method and wisdom. And I will point to a few aspects of the method, but let me just stay for a while with the wisdom aspect, because all of these, in a sense, underline the values that His Holiness recommends and the methods by which we can internalize them and make them our own. When we talk about understanding the nature of reality, he is deeply inspired, as has been the Buddhist tradition, by the insights or the articulations, let me say, the insights may have pre-existed of quantum physics, which tells us that the very presence of the observer impacts not merely the perception, but the nature of reality itself. And the minute we're able to recognize that, whether it is through celebrating diversity and going to places of worship of different traditions and experiencing the reality of different people's experience of their tradition, or we look at the wisdom of modern science, we begin to recognize that there is no single reality, that each one of us experiences and perceives reality differently. His Holiness, extending this further, a few years ago, there was, it was the centenary of Swami Vivekananda, and at the Ramakrishna Mission in Delhi, His Holiness, paid great tribute to Sri Ramakrishna and then to Swami Vivekananda. And that was really because, here was Sri Ramakrishna, who was considered an avatar and, a god in human form. And what did he do? He, in full public display, in a sense, engaged in the techniques and practices, the sadhanas, as a sadhaka of the different strands of Hindu practice and aspiration. And then he didn't stop there. What does he do? He steps out of the temple precincts and goes and lives in a little cottage and lives the life of a Muslim, including eating the diet of a Muslim. And he does the same, with other traditions. And Swami Vivekananda then came in, and this is a very important synchronicity, in a sense, this aspect of what His Holiness is telling us, so Swami Vivekananda comes in and says tells us and suggests, 4 different archetypes, which is sort of, the karma yogi, the man of action, Jnana yogi, the man of wisdom, Raj yogi, the man of practice, and bhakti. So, the different human personalities, the proclivities. Of course, no one is uniquely one or the other. And tells us that for each one of them, there is a different path or a combination of paths. So a bhakta will try and will use bhakti or worship to experience an aspect or version or a kind of reality that is most appropriate for him. And so His Holiness tells us today, and then takes off from there and re-articulates it, juxtaposed with his own striving, learning, and commitment, that each one of us has a different mental disposition. And so each one of us needs a different mental diet. So just like we need a different physical diet, we need a different mental diet. And it is this that enabled someone like Swami Vivekananda, who was a student of a bhakta, to go out and say that the Buddha is my Ishta and Ramakrishna is my master. And so it is that sort of deep respect rooted in one's very being that celebrates diversity and defines aspiration. There are some very crucial building blocks, as it were, to the quest of the Dalai Lama, and that really starts with the aspect of compassion, because His Holiness is considered the Buddha aspect of compassion, as I mentioned. And why is to be compassionate, so crucial and important? It is not merely something that's virtuous, so that a moral science class will tell you will please the gods, or that you do because you want to score brownie points. It is inherently valuable to each of us who reach a state of compassion, not merely the physical gestures of compassion, but become truly compassionate human beings. Again, His Holiness has regular engagements, conversations with scientists, including psychologists and psychologists, and testing, psychological testing that some of the great universities of the world have established that people who have mental problems or are not at peace with themselves or do not feel fulfilled have an obsession with the I, me, mine. There's a very exaggerated sense of oneself. And the self, the sense of the I that suffers. And so the practice of compassion and the techniques and methods that are associated with the practice of compassion soften that sense of the self, of the I that suffers. So a lot of practice, or the practices that the methods that His Holiness would recommend have to do with the softening of the self. Another one of my favorite stories of His Holiness is that sometime in the 1980s I did a film on Baba Amte, and those of you who may not be familiar with the story, Baba Amte was did amazing work with leprosy, and His Holiness saw the film and said, I want to meet this man. And so we went to Anandwan, which is a 3-4 hour drive from Nagpur to Baba Amte's community. It's sort of obviously a very simple rural community where he was looking after the victims of leprosy. Anyway, we spent the night, and the next morning, Baba and His Holiness decided that they would go around the Anandwan community on their own. And at a distance, as they were walking back towards the group of us who were looking out for them, they were both weeping. And I haven't seen His Holiness, or Baba Amte for that matter, really howling. And Baba Amte had been so moved by His Holiness, and His Holiness so moved by what Baba Amte was doing, that His Holiness said, I am, you practice what I only preach. And that was such a powerful lesson. The compassion is not just what we preach, but who we are and what we do. And that has been the second amongst many. I'm just sort of picking on a few core human universal values independent of faith and tradition or particular mental diets that we might need. That is at the core of what is His Holiness embodies and practices. Now, as I sort of move forward a bit towards this idea of method, the method represents ways of training our mind so that it leaves imprints in the different layers of our consciousness that then govern our actions. So that really is the description, in a sense, of traditional methods of meditation. And underlying that is the belief or the experience of many practitioners that it is not so as much the action, but it is the thought that we plant or that comes up for us, and we reinforce that affects or impacts the imprints on our layers of our consciousness that govern future behavior. The second pillar of understanding that reinforces intellectually is the recognition of interdependence. How our very survival, our emotions and our feelings depend on other people. So if someone smiles at me, I feel better, I feel good. If I smile at someone else, hopefully I feel good and the other person feels good. So to recognize deeply the idea of interdependence. The second value is, or third value, I'm just sort of chalking these up, some of the key elements of this, is the idea of impermanence. That we somehow have convinced ourselves, at least moment to moment, as life unfolds, that of permanence. We sort of hang on to things as if they will be eternal and constant. And that is very closely linked to the idea of change. I mean, impermanence and change go in hand in hand. We see this happening, but yet it isn't something that we're able to internalize and reflexively believe, except when we despair. Oh, I am now growing old. And rather than seeing our aging as a natural process of reality and how it juxtaposes with the nature of reality, we tend to resist the fact that we are growing old or things are changing. Now, if you just consider that we as individuals, and it's whatever, I'm having a senior citizen moment, but we know that our cells renew themselves, so often in X number of minutes, years, and hours, or whatever it is. And we are constantly changing. Our emotions are changing. One moment we think somebody is wonderful, another moment we think they're not. Our moods, our feelings, our preferences, our sensibilities, the food we liked when we were young, we do not like anymore, etc., etc. It's changing. Simultaneous to that, the objects of our desire or need or want that we are grasping are also changing. We then look at a little closer the method dimensions, which is how we can formally imprint some of these ideas: impermanence, change, compassion, diversity, the otherness of the other, etc. So the basic principle is that you, in a practice, you sit down and you quieten the mind just by observing it, so that there is some level of stillness. And then through the mind, the intellect, and through reason and thought, which stands up to the scrutiny of logic, we begin to feed certain thoughts to our mind. But we also know that these practices have to be sustained, that if you stop doing that, it will gradually regress to its normal state. So it tells you that changing the very physiology of the brain, where emotions are stored biochemically, is possible. And much of this research has been done in universities around the world, which His Holiness has supported. And I think he has done that because he sees the modern universities as the equivalents of the ancient universities of Nalanda and the Gurukuls, which were the repository of wisdom and training of the mind. And there is a deep commitment that I always hesitate to use the word secular, because today secular has in many cultures and discourses become a dirty word. So let's just say an inclusive environment. That, so for example, in the Nalanda tradition, all ideas, discourses, and treatises that were developed by the scholars were not presented and debated and argued and refined amongst the converted or the faithful. It was vigorously engaged in by a diversity of opinions and perspectives, so it could be chiseled and refined and purified, in a sense, to represent something that had been through the rigorous scrutiny of the human intellect and would stand up to reason and logic. Because the reason why there are these two pillars of method and wisdom, one that works with the emotions and feelings and sensibilities while accessing the mind, and the mind does that in turn, is that unless it stands up to the scrutiny of reason, logic, and felt experience, it is not likely to be an enduring transformation. So this was just to give you a flavor, and there's not that much more that I know, but to give you a flavor of the kind of values, practices that somebody like the Dalai Lama embodies, and that the principles that we might be able to assimilate to find our own particular mental diets that will make us more fulfilled, happier human beings.